Hello and welcome to episode 94 of the Online Course Creator Show. I'm so happy to have you here for this episode today. And today I am talking about how I went from snowboarding to startups to sustainable business success. Now you may be wondering, what is this all about? And this is actually quite different to what I normally do. Okay, so I don't normally share, I try and keep these podcasts very strategic, very tactical, like things that are actually going to help you so that you walk away from the podcast episode and you can actually do something with it. But today I'm doing something totally different where I'm actually telling you my story. And I recently realized that I've never actually shared my full story in one place. So what kind of created the need for me to record this podcast was just a small thing that happened late last year. So I ran a webinar. I shared a bit of my story at the start of the webinar, and someone that I know that is someone that I talk to quite often in the business space and someone that I really respect reached out to me. She actually signed up to the webinar and came to the webinar. And she reached out to me afterwards and said to me, I had no idea that you had done all of that stuff in your career. And she was like, wow, I had literally no idea. So it really made me think that I don't share a lot of the stuff or experience that I have, especially in business. And I don't share it enough. In fact, I very rarely share it. But from the point of view of you, the listener, you may be thinking why should I trust Lou? What experience does Lou have? How do I know that she's legit? So I think it's important that I do share this in this space. So this episode is really going to serve as sharing my story, particularly from a professional point of view. I will go into a few personal things, but honestly, I'm not going to go super in depth. I have very personal stories to tell, and I swear one day I'm going to write a book because some of the stuff that I've experienced is crazy, and it shaped who I am and actually made me given me a lot of life experience. I guess you would say it's quite colourful, but today is really about the professional side of things. So to me, creating this podcast, I'm not going to lie, it feels a little bit self-indulgent because it's not what I normally do, right? And I think I've been procrastinating for a couple of weeks on actually pressing record on this, but here I am today. I have just come back from Pilates and I am feeling like I'm fully ready to sit down and make this happen because I want you to know where I've come from and how and why I've landed where I am right now hosting this podcast as someone who's very passionate about helping women make more money in a way that works for them. I hope this episode gives you a much better insight into that and who I am and where I've come from. So I've been that lost 20-something with no clue in the world what I wanted to do. I have been at rock bottom and I have rebuilt from nothing. And I've also built a business that's now given me complete freedom. So today I'm taking you behind the scenes of how all of that happened. And whether you're just starting out or you're pivoting in business, I hope my story reminds you that you don't have to have it all figured out from the start because as you are going to hear, I definitely did not. Or you don't need the perfect life that's gone to plan. I think sometimes we see all these people who are really succeeding in the online space and they just have this fairy tale life, and that definitely has not been the case for me. It's been a twisting path for me to finally land in the spot right here. So I'm going to give you the full story, the full download in this podcast. So if this is something that interests you, stay tuned. However, if you are after a more tactical episode, I recommend to go and listen to something else. So I grew up right at the bottom of the South Island of New Zealand, which is a pretty remote place. New Zealand itself is so far from the rest of the world. Obviously, we're pretty close to Australia. But to get anywhere past Australia, it's a very solid journey. We're looking at 7-8 hours to get anywhere else past Australia or the Pacific Islands. So I grew up right at the bottom, which means I was even more remote. And my mum's family is actually from a very, very, very remote part of that, which is like the farm that she grew up on actually borders the Fiordland National Park. So that's how remote it is. Fiordland is one of the most remote places on the planet. It's insanely beautiful. You may have been there. I think it's a very, very popular tourist destination to go to Fiordland, to go to Milford Sound, so around that area. And we spent a lot of time going there as children growing up. Obviously, my grandparents still lived there, and we had a holiday house that we shared with a bunch of different families there as well, right on the lake in Tiana. So I grew up in that area, but we lived in a different town, in a smaller place. And I grew up with 3 brothers. So I was the only girl. It was just me and my mum, and then my dad, 3 brothers. So I've always been surrounded by males pretty much my whole life. Right now I live in a house. I'm like the only female, and I have my son, my partner, and quite often we have his 2 stepsons with us as well, who are now grown up, so they're not here very often. But again, I just always seem to be surrounded by males. So maybe that's a reason that I have this business where I predominantly do work with females, and I absolutely love that. So I grew up on a farm. I was born with this knowing that that was not the place for me. I have had that feeling since I was born. Like, I knew that this was not the place for me. I'm not meant to live here. And I knew that right from the start. And I feel like my whole life I was planning my exit from there. And luckily, I actually got sent to boarding school in a small city that was like 3 or 4 hours away from where I lived, which was the best thing ever. And when I was at boarding school, it was a girls' school. And one of my favourite subjects was economics. I absolutely loved it. Like, it just made sense to me. Me and my teacher had an absolute love-hate relationship. I think she actually hated me, but then she liked that I was so attuned to economics, which obviously she loved as well. Like, we really had this love-hate relationship. So it was quite funny. And she was one of those teachers that she was like the one in the school that everyone kind of joked about because she was like quite mean. But then she had this soft side to her. I don't know. But anyway, we had a real weird relationship. But it just totally made sense to me. And I did like young enterprise with her and all of that stuff. And just business has always made sense to me. And I don't know. I think that was just like a thing that I was naturally born with. My dad was a farmer. And obviously as a farmer, you have to be quite business savvy because you're running a business at the end of the day. And in order to stay in that business, you have to be good at what you do and you have to be making money. But it's interesting because none of my brothers have really got this business sense. And I don't know why, but I was just the only one that really had it, I guess. And I think it's no mistake that I've ended up in business myself. So I always was attracted to the idea of business. Not necessarily working for myself though, but I just wanted to be involved in big business and surrounded by things that were happening in big numbers and all of that kind of stuff. And I finished school. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and I really just followed what everyone else was doing and went to uni because I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I wasn't one of those kids that was like, I'm going to be a lawyer or anything like that. Funny side story. I actually did want to be a lawyer for a very long time. And then my mum thought that it would be interesting because I was so dead set on this career that she would take me to court for the day to give me some exposure to it. And then I came out of court that day. We were just like observing. And I came out, it was criminal court for like petty crime. And I came out and I was just like, I do not want to be a lawyer. Those people, I'm just not interested anymore. So I kind of wish she hadn't done that. So yeah, her taking me to court that day completely changed the trajectory of my career. But as a result, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I ended up going to uni. I started doing a degree in marketing, a double degree in marketing and tourism. I'd always had this interest in marketing, and marketing actually stems from economics. So marketing was invented in the 70s. It actually came from the study of economics. It is based on supply and demand. So economics and marketing are very, very similar, except marketing is like obviously where you get to use the creativity, all of that kind of stuff. So that really appealed to me because I am very like a bit of type A, a bit of type B. I love data, I love numbers, but I also love the creative side of things. So anyway, I went to uni completely, like passed some subjects, didn't pass others. I was like a bit of a lost cause at this stage of my life. I had no direction. So if you've got kids who are in this phase, I wouldn't worry too much about it because I think that many of us go through this. And I had really itchy feet. Like, as I said before, I just really wanted to leave, to get out, and I wanted to see the world, but no one else was really doing that. I'd never travelled overseas at this point. I'd never left New Zealand. I had been on planes. I'd been to the North Island. So very, very sheltered as well. Like, actually unbelievable when I reflect. So after a year at university, and I was really just mucking around at this point, I made a big decision and I said no more. I left and I had no idea what I was going to do next, but I just felt like I was following everyone else along with what their life plans were, and it wasn't for me. And I just knew that I wanted something more. I wanted something different. And I knew that I had to probably go on a bit of a journey to get there. I kind of entered this lost phase at this point. So I definitely had a bit of a reputation amongst my friends that I was like a bit of a drifter. I would like get in the car and drive for hours and end up in a different town, like a very, very independent. And I think that I got that from high school, but also growing up with three brothers that weren't really interested in what I was doing. Like, we didn't have similar hobbies or whatever. So a lot of the stuff I just do by myself. So my friends were like, you know, what is she doing? I felt like everyone was always like gossiping about what I was up to, but I just felt like I had to go on a bit of a journey. I've always been a bit of a nomad, which is, I don't really consider myself to be like that now. I very much love where I live and I'm very settled, but I still love to travel. But back in those days, I was like, I just wanted all of these different experiences. So I did a few different jobs for like a year. That was all well and good. None of them felt quite right. And they were just like basic jobs anyway. And then I ended up deciding that I was going to go to a completely different part of New Zealand and do a year-long adventure tourism course. So at this point, I was feeling very lost, and I recognized that I didn't actually have any hobbies. And I think this is a really common thing for people to experience as they go through life, especially actually once you are running a business, you realize that you don't have any hobbies. You don't know who you are outside of what you do. And I guess when you don't have an established career like I didn't at this point, I was very much like, I need to find direction. So I went into this adventure tourism course, and it was the best thing I ever did, hands down. So it was amazing. We traveled as part of the program. We did whitewater rafting. We did kayaking. We did snowboarding. We did sea kayaking. We did some rock climbing, all of this kind of stuff. And it was really like the life of dreams. Okay, so we would actually travel Monday to Wednesday or Monday to Thursday of every week, and we would go away to a destination and like all camp there and do like training in each of these fields. So we did like a month of each. So when we were whitewater rafting, for example, we would be leaving the town that we were all based in and would go to where the river was and would camp up there, and we would spend our days doing whitewater rafting, and we were training to be guides and this stuff. But also, most of us had never done this stuff before. So it was like unreal. Looking back, it was just like such an amazing time. And it really gave me this, I guess, answer to this feeling of not having interests and that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess also growing up on a farm, I had always loved the outdoors. I'd always been very sporty. And having this opportunity to get like really, like to go to places that most people never get to see was absolutely amazing. And it opened up a whole new level of experience that I was able to have and passion for the outdoors, which was so good. And one of the activities that I learned to do that year was snowboarding. And I have to say I became completely obsessed. So growing up, I had gone to the mountains a little bit, but my parents weren't really into it. And we were skiing. And I never really went enough to get good at it. So when I did the snowboarding in this course, I had never actually been on a snowboard before. I think at this point, I must have been like 20, 21. Never been on a snowboard before. So I actually had to learn to snowboard from scratch. And, you know, the people in the course who were already snowboarders, they were kind of like learning how to be instructors, that kind of thing. But I was literally starting from scratch. So, yeah, it took me a while, but I got there. And within that month I was snowboarding, absolutely loved it. And I started thinking like towards the end of that year, I did that's how I ended up doing some guiding with the sea kayaking down in Fiordland. So I'd be taking people from all over the world into Milford Sound, into Doubtful Sound, and we'd go on day trips, or in Doubtful Sound it was overnight trips, and we'd be taking tourists from all around the world in there as a group. And that was just like such an unreal experience, especially when you saw their reaction to the scenery. Like we'd just all stop and sit on the side of the road and look at the mountains, and everyone would be like, wow, this is amazing. It really was. But, you know, around this time I was also thinking, which of these skills could actually become a job? What have I learned this year that I could actually turn into a career? And I love the whitewater rafting. I love the sea kayaking. They only went for they're very seasonal, right? And so is snowboarding, but I thought actually I can probably travel more with the snowboarding, and it's going to help me or it's going to actually give me a skill that I can use in different places. So it had the most potential to me, and it lit me up. I decided to choose snowboarding as my career. And at the end of that year, I actually went to the USA and snowboarded over there. So for the first time ever, I got on a plane by myself and traveled the 12 hours from New Zealand to LA and didn't know anyone. Got off the plane. We actually stayed in the very first night. They organised for us all to stay in South Central LA, which was, I don't know why they do that. I don't know if they still do it, but that was a very big thing in those days, that they would put you into a hotel in Compton. I don't understand why they do that. And then we'd stay there the night, and everyone got on the bus in the morning and went to Mammoth. And when I actually got on the bus the next day, I realised there was people that I kind of knew. So that was cool. But went to Mammoth Mountain. I don't think I mentioned that, in California. So if you live in California, I have no doubt that you know where Mammoth Mountain is. Very well-known ski resort in the US. And that first season, I worked there as a lift operator. And now I had the best time. I love the culture, I love the people, and I love the snowboarding. So I was just snowboarding every single day just to get around the mountain to where I needed to do my job. My job at that point was not snowboarding itself. So I was helping people get on and off the lifts. But through that season, I got way better at snowboarding. My level of skill at snowboarding went from 0 to pretty good, pretty fast, because I was doing it every single day. And I decided that I wanted to become a snowboard instructor, because obviously it's way more fun than being a lifty, and also much better paid. So I returned to New Zealand after that season. I trained to be an instructor. Then I went back to Mammoth. And that second season in Mammoth, I absolutely loved it, because obviously I was getting paid a lot more. The pay for snowboard instructing, the base rate isn't that great, but if you can get referrals and get to the top of the list, which I'll tell you about in a minute, you can actually get paid really well. Not to mention that you can get tipped really well as well. So I didn't realize this, but in the ski school that I was teaching in, there is a priority list. And there was 80 instructors, right? So you would rank somewhere from 1 to 80 in terms of your popularity. What happened to me was not intentional. I didn't even know about this list, but it kind of makes me think, it's my natural marketer in me, I guess. So within the first week, I was teaching a group to snowboard, and it was quite a small group. It was an afternoon class. There weren't many people in it, like 3 or 4. And I used to sit on the lift and I'd talk to these people. And also I think my Kiwi accent helped a lot, right? I think that people were just attracted to the foreign accent, especially when they're going skiing or snowboarding. And one girl, I was just speaking to her and I said to her, what are you doing for the next few days? And she said, I'm just going to come back and keep doing this. And, you're helping me get up and running, but I'd like to get better. And I just said, well, why don't you just hire me for a few days and I'll show you, you'll get better way faster and you'll have me with you around the mountain, all of that kind of stuff. And she was like, okay. So she went back to the ski school and requested me to teach her for 2 days, I think it was. And all of a sudden I went from somewhere in like the 70s, because I was a brand new instructor, and because it was so early in the season and a lot of instructors hadn't even arrived yet, I went up to the top 10. And this was crazy because I was a newbie, right? I was considered a rookie. And all of a sudden I'm on the top 10 instructors. And because I got there so early in the season, I stayed there for the entire season, which meant that instead of being stuck teaching all of the kids, I got more referrals. I got more, like, better lessons. When someone came to the ski school and said, I want to have a private lesson and I don't have a particular instructor in mind, because I was so far up this list, they would literally look at like, okay, like the first 5 people are booked out today because they've got requests already, who's next on the list? And my name would be there. So I would get given the next, I'd be the next on the list, which meant that I ended up having the dream season. And it was just so funny because I had so many people, actually some of the other really experienced instructors who were like number 20 or 30 on the list, who had years of experience, and some of them had actually coached me in New Zealand to be an instructor. So they were like, how are you so far up the list? That's not fair. And it really annoyed them. I actually just thought it was quite funny. But I also had quite a few other rookies, especially, I just remember this American guy coming up to me, but he'd be like, Louise, how come you're so far up the list? That's probably a really terrible American accent. He's like, what did you do? What's your secret? And it just really made me laugh because it was so simple, the answer. And the answer was, you just got to back yourself and tell people to hire you. And I did that, and I didn't even do that intentionally, but it's just like my natural thing to be like, well, we should do this because it makes sense for you, right? If you want to get better at snowboarding really fast, then come and have a private lesson, and you already know me and I know where you're at. I think that I said that to her on the lift, like, I know where you're at because we've already worked together. We've already spent the afternoon together, so I can help you get better a lot faster. And then she went, and that changed the game for me, right? So I just said to him, you've got to back yourself and put yourself out there and available to help that person go further. When he did ask me that, it was probably too late in the season for him. And once you're stuck down at the bottom of the list, then it would be quite hard to get up. But it's really just sales, right? Like putting yourself out there. And I wasn't doing it from a place of I need to get more sales, because I didn't even know that that's where, about this priority list thing at the time. I just knew that it made sense because it would help her faster. So it was about serving her in the best way possible. And as a result of that, I got to benefit massively. So absolutely loved that season. I did not want to go back to New Zealand at the end of that season. So I went and lived in Canada for a bit. I was in Banff. I tried to love it there, but I absolutely did not. I think I just gotten so used to the American culture. I had so many American friends. Like, I didn't really hang out with the Aussies and Kiwis because there were tons of them at this resort. And yes, I was definitely friends with them, but I was living with a whole bunch of Americans. I was very intertwined with that culture. Yeah, I just loved everything about it. Went to Canada, did not like it. Ended up going back to California, spending the summer in Mammoth, which was actually really amazing. It's such an amazing spot in the Sierra Nevada mountains there in the summertime. It almost actually was better than the winter. And I don't know what my plan was at that time, actually. I did have a ticket to London but I never actually took it. I was just very happy in Mammoth. And anyway, me and one of my friends from the US, we decided to go to Costa Rica for a little bit and went there on holiday. Long story short, I ended up meeting a guy who I just fell head over heels for and decided to stay there. So I did end up going back to the US for a little bit, and then I went back to Costa Rica and ended up living there. So ended up living quite close to the border of Costa Rica and Panama, and then spent quite a lot of time in Panama as well on a Caribbean island there. So was living there for a little bit, and lo and behold, I ended up getting pregnant at 23. Was I 23? Yeah, I think I was. And was like, oh my God, what is going on here? Ended up deciding at that point, like I was super young, right? And I'm actually so grateful I'd had that experience beforehand where I went and done the adventure tourism, and I had actually got myself out of the country and gone on a big adventure and like had a really amazing experience traveling overseas. Because at this point I was like, okay, I need stability. I had nothing at this point, right? I had nothing. I was traveling. I was like a backpacker, and all of a sudden I'm pregnant and having a baby with someone that I hadn't really been with for that long. Like my parents were devastated, okay? They're like, that is an understatement. They were just so angry at me. But something in me was like, well, I'm just going to do this anyway. And so we decided to move back to New Zealand. I had my son at 23 years old. I think I turned 24 like a couple of weeks later. And yeah, life actually took quite a big turn at this point. So while we'd had like a seemingly great relationship while we were in Costa Rica, that was his home turf. He seemed like a really lovely guy there. When we got back to New Zealand, it completely changed. The relationship dynamic completely changed. And it actually became about survival rather than anything. So I went back, had the baby. A few months later, I actually went back to uni. So at this point, decided to go back to uni, which was just like, it felt like what I'd started all of those years ago when I did start my marketing degree. And this was so good in hindsight. I actually went overseas. I lived my life. I had an adventure, and I decided, like I knew that actually what I started back then is what I want to do. I want to work in marketing. I had that clarity, and I think that really made a difference for me because I know so many people go to uni or college, whatever you call it, and they do a degree, they spend all this money on the degree, and then they actually don't end up working in that field, or they finish the degree, they're like, I don't even want to do that. They go and do something else, or they might spend like 5 to 10 years in their career working in that field and then realize they want to do something else, and they might go and retrain. I think having that break for me really made me realize that actually, yes, you still want to do that. After all these years, after all these different experiences and living in these different places, you actually still want to do that degree. So I ended up, and obviously now I'm like, okay, I have to go from super free and just doing whatever I want. I was a snowboard instructor, like, you know, there was no stability there. There was no financial stability. As I said, I was like literally a backpacker. I had nothing. Like I didn't have any furniture. I didn't have a place to live, none of that stuff. But when you are suddenly having a child, things can change very, very fast. And it made me grow up incredibly quickly. And I have to say, I feel like for me, having a child young has completely changed my life for the better. And you know, you may have heard me recently saying I've got an 18-year-old now. I'm like 42 and I've got an 18-year-old. So for me, it has actually worked out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. But on the flip side of that, I was now in a situation where I was in like a domestic violent relationship. So I only had like 2.5 years to do at uni because I'd already done the first year all those years ago. During that time, I was in this relationship. I was just like surviving. Like the stuff that went on behind closed doors, I'm not going to tell you about. One day I might write a book, but it was awful. I also just kept my head down. I kept working hard at uni, got amazing marks, which I actually found really funny because when I was at uni the first time, I was definitely not getting amazing marks. I was getting the old C's, get degrees. Anyway, ended up leaving that relationship, finally escaping, which is actually one of the scariest and hardest things I've ever had to do, around about the same time that I was like doing my exams for my final year. So really those two things happened at the same time. Got out of a dangerous situation, which actually ended me in an even more dangerous situation, because I don't know if you've ever heard or what your experience is with domestic violence. I really hope that you have never experienced it. But it is very true what they say, that the most dangerous time is after you leave. And that is why so many women don't leave sooner, because they are so scared of what's going to happen. And when you do finally leave, you are in a very, very dangerous situation. To add to that, I also had no money, no income, because I'd just finished uni. And unfortunately for me, I had debt that was not mine, that had been borrowed in my name because the other person didn't have permanent residency in New Zealand. So they had twisted my arm and, got me to get this personal loan in my name, and it was about $15,000. And it hadn't even been used for what they said they were going to get it for. And now it was all on me to pay it back, and I had no recourse. Also, legally, I couldn't leave the town that I lived in due to restrictions. So if you've been through a separation and you're both parents, then the other person, I don't know what it's like this internationally, but in New Zealand, and I know in Australia it's the same, that the other person can actually stop you moving away. And I actually got offered a really great job in another town, and I had to turn it down. And I ended up telling them why I couldn't take it, and they were devastated. They were like, how is this fair? This is not okay. And I'm like, I know that. However, it's also the law. I can't fight against it. So I spent a lot of that time with lawyers, and actually that legal fight went on until my son was 16, on and off over the years. So I guess I just got very, very used to handling a certain amount of pressure, right? Where you're got legal proceedings, all of that kind of thing, and they never really go away. But at this point I was like 25, and as I said before, there's something about when you are absolutely at rock bottom and you have to claw your way out of it. Like nothing will motivate you more. So at this point, I had to get myself up and running real quick. Luckily, I was also graduating. I was a mature student, which I do think is an advantage when you're a little bit older. I think it's easier to get jobs, definitely, than if you're just a graduate who's 21, super fresh. Because I was a little bit older, I think that helped. And I'd had a bit of life experience, gone away, got my degree, which I think employers do look on as a good thing. Well, and I think in this case they did. So I got a job at an export company, and I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. At the same time, I found a house to live in. It was quite a nice house that I can afford. I always seem to be able to hack that. So I could find a good place for a good price. And then this is something that I ended up doing, and was one of the reasons I was able to buy property as a single mother and a few years later, was that I would then ask my friends that I loved, they were some of my really good friends, would come and rent out a room, because we were all still quite young. They would rent out a room. They would, this one in particular, she just wanted somewhere really quiet and really stable to live. So she came and lived with me and my son. She was studying. She was also a mature student. So she'd gone back to do another degree. And she actually introduced me to this guy called Eckhart Tolle. And she was telling me all about this book. And I was in this situation where I was very how the hell did my life end up like this? I'm screwed. I have a child. I have no partner. I'm 25. All my friends were overseas, living in London. 3 of my friends went and lived on an island in Greece for 3 months. And I was just how am I here in this town that I don't even like? Because again, I always wanted to be somewhere else. And I am a single mum with hardly any money. I'm rock bottom. I've got all this debt. Like, how am I in this situation? I felt like this incredible weight. And even though it was motivating and it's what made me, it was just a very heavy burden to carry. And obviously, for a good solid year after breaking up with my partner, I was actually having to look over my shoulder. I was having to take my safety very, very seriously. And like, security was a big thing for me, and for good reason, based on some of the stuff that happened during that time. And again, I'm not going to go into that. Maybe I will share that story one day, maybe I won't. But I was very much in this situation, like, how did I get here? How do I get out of this? Like, this feels really, really heavy. And my friend that was living with us at the time, she kept telling me about Eckhart Tolle, and I ended up reading A New Earth. And I feel like I have so much to credit that book for. It was the first self-development book I had ever read. Like, I'd never really been introduced to the world of self-development. Like, my family is not into that at all. I always hear of all these like successful entrepreneurs who have been doing that stuff since they were like 16 or whatever. Definitely was not even on my radar. So this was the first self-development book I ever read, and I just love his way of looking at things. And it was all about living in the present moment, right? Because there was so much worry, there was so much anxiety, and it was all about you can only take each moment at a time. And also he had this like spiritual lens across many different versions of spirituality, I guess you could call it, different religions, and the weaving factors between all of them and how to use that to live your life. So I did grow up going to church, actually. So I wouldn't say that I'd never had any spiritual connection, but this was the very much first like spiritual thing that had happened in my life, really, that was on my terms, not going to the Catholic Church, which is what I got forced to do as a child and was never really that into it because I was forced to do it, right? So, and I love that it was like not a particular religion. It was just like the universe. This book, it just transformed the way that I viewed the situation that I was in. And it was actually like a lifeline. I'm not like a super spiritual person, but I definitely have like that guiding me all of the time. And I think it stemmed from this. Like, I've always believed in, well, especially since this point, that there's something greater guiding me, and I've just got to trust the process and actually live in each moment and really experience each moment. And that's what that book taught me. So I would actually say that book completely changed my life. At this point, I had a job that I'd just taken at the export company, and I'd just taken an entry-level job to basically get into a career because I needed income, right? And it's so funny looking back at this time, because I remember one of my friends, and she's like not very driven career-wise, and she said to me, oh my God, now that you're like single, you can just go on the benefit and like just stay at home and cruise for the next few years. And I'm just like, oh my God, that sounds like the worst thing ever. I don't want to do that at all. And it just made me laugh that she thought like that. And I was like, well, I guess I could do that, but that sounds like, how is that going to benefit me? Like, then he's going to go to school, because at this point my son was 2. He just turned 2. So I was like, then he's going to go to school and I'm going to have nothing. Like, I've always been one of those people that needs to be fulfilled. And I guess I have always had that internal drive, that internal push to find my way, I guess. So I was like, screw that. I had this job, and very entry level, very boring, didn't really like it. But this was a massive, massive company, turned over multiple billions of dollars a year, big corporate, huge company. So it was actually a company that exported beef and lamb all over the world. So not a very attractive industry, but definitely one of the biggest commodities in the world is meat, because everyone needs protein. Everyone's looking for meat in all different markets around the world. And I'd done some papers on international business at university. So I was very, very, very interested in this side of business, of marketing. And it was just, I'd started to see that in this entry-level role. And then like 8-9 months of doing that job, I realized that, or someone left the sales and marketing team. So I was like, they found out that I had a marketing degree. So then someone put me forward for that role. And because I'd already worked in the company, I just had an interview with the guy that ran that department, and he hired me straight away. So it was an internal promotion within like 8 or 9 months into what I wanted to be doing. So this was a marketing and sales role, exactly what I wanted to do. It was actually more sales than marketing. So it wasn't really a marketing role, even though that's what it said on the job title. In that industry at the time, they considered marketing to be like sales. So, and then they ended up getting a proper marketing division later. So my role predominantly in that job was to sell New Zealand lamb. So I worked on the lamb side into the UK markets. So we had massive customers like Tesco, Marks and Spencer's, Aldi, and these were relationships that this company had for a very long time. So it's not like it was a traveling role that I was going around trying to find new customers. Like, this was a much bigger company than that. These relationships have been going for years. So my role was to sell and manage the relationship between us at the bottom of New Zealand and these massive international supermarket chains. I also looked after customer relationships in Germany and Bulgaria, so some Eastern European countries as well. I think it had a few Russian customers. But mainly it was the UK. In that job, I managed well over $1 billion worth of sales every single year, which is crazy. And, to some people that may seem like unrealistic, but it's not, because I would make a sale and I'd put it through the system and it would be like 20 or 30 or 50 containers of lamb that would then go into the container from the factories, get put on a ship, and would travel around the world and end up on the supermarket shelf in like Tesco, for example. So huge amount of responsibility. And actually, I can't actually believe that I had a job like that as my first role, but it was so exciting. And I loved the numbers. I loved learning about international trading. I was like converting interest rates like every day, all day. It was one of those situations where we were all like open plan and would be yelling across at each other, like conversion rates and all of this kind of thing, and sales made. And it was kind of like a smaller version of what I'd imagine it would be like working on like Wall Street or something like that, like very like that masculine business environment. And I loved it. I loved the pace. I loved the global element. I love when the customers would travel to town and we'd have to go out and wine and dine them. And, I'd never done that. I'd never been in a position in my life. And my parents were never really people that would take us out. We lived kind of in the middle of nowhere. And it just wasn't the done thing from my life that I had grown up with. But all of a sudden we're like fine dining. And I never had that experience. Like, I didn't even know how to do that. So I had to learn how to do all of that stuff as well. So I think that experience was really good for me in so many ways, but I also found like corporate was super slow and outdated and old-fashioned, and I didn't have any say in anything really. You don't have any ability, well, I didn't have any ability to create change or to move faster, and honestly, I wasn't really passionate about the product. I didn't go into marketing to sell meat. I went into the marketing because I love the data and the creativity, and I got to use all the numbers. I didn't get to use the creative side of me, which is like really marketing focused rather than sales. So I started to, after like 3 years there, I started to really want to get into marketing, and I started applying for marketing roles in that same town. And I just wasn't getting a look in, because this is a town that once you have a job in this town, people stay in their job forever. And also people are like, well, you do that, you can't do that. I don't know, it's just this like limited way of thinking, I guess. So I'd be going to these marketing job interviews and they'd say, but you work in sales for international meat exports. Like, that's what you do. We don't need that skill set. And I'm just like, I was getting so frustrated. Like, no one would give me a chance. And it was really annoying me. So I decided to pull the pin. I'd had enough. I'd taken that job as far as I wanted it, as far as it could take me, really. And I found they were also a company that kept dangling the carrot in front of me. Like, if you do this, you'll be going to the UK next year. Or if you do this, if you just keep doing what you're doing, then you'll do that. And then the next year would come and it wouldn't happen. And I just got really sick of that. And I actually have learned so much since then that that's actually a strategy to keep you on the hook, to keep you working hard. And that model, it just annoys me, And in some ways, I was a very, very good employee. I reckon that I'm actually one of those people that was very programmed to be a good employee, to go to work and sit at your desk and be quiet and just do your work and then get results. And they did really value my contribution there. They'd always say that I was doing a really good job. My work ethic was great. And I love the challenge, and I was always up for the numbers, all of that stuff, even though I was like bad at maths at school. So there's no correlation between that, by the way, and actually doing business. Business numbers are easy compared to the maths that we do at school. Yeah, I decided to pull the pin, and that was like another step in my journey, and I could not believe the reaction. So what I did was I was like, I'm actually going back to uni, and I'm going to do a postgrad diploma in marketing, because I just wasn't getting these opportunities. And to be fair, in this town, there was not a huge amount of career opportunities. Like, the place where I had been working, which was a big company, was probably like one of the biggest employers in town. So I decided to go back to uni, do the postgrad, and I handed in my notice. I called my boss into one of the office rooms and told him that I was leaving. I said, I'm going back to uni and I'm starting my own business, because that was my plan as well. He laughed at me, and oh my God, that has fueled me for years. I don't think it really motivates me anymore, but it just annoyed me even more. I was just like, how can you be so like demoralizing to someone else, to laugh at them when they decide that they want to go and do something else? And I also remember a guy that I worked with who had the same boss as me, but he was he was more experienced, he was older. And he said to me, why do you think you can start your own business? Because what do you have that's going to help anyone? And I was just like, okay, you're basically saying that about yourself because we have the same job. I just could not believe it, to be honest. I could not believe that he said that. And it annoyed me so much, and it drove me so much to be like, I'm just going to show you guys. So I went to back to uni, and then I think I started freelancing, doing the marketing stuff around about like halfway through, or maybe like a third into that year. The good thing about going back to uni at this time was, between when I'd graduated and when I went back to uni to do my postgraduate diploma, digital marketing had really started to come out, but it was still quite new. But people, professors and academics had started to write papers about the use of social media in business. People were very much starting to look at social media like, how can I use this to grow my business? So it was more practical in that sense, that before we're just using like high level theory, consumer behavior, all of that kind of stuff in my undergraduate degree. But my postgraduate was very much like, how do we actually use this practically for businesses? So it was very, very new. And the cool thing about that is they bought some agency people that worked in an agency in Auckland. They flew down to the University of Otago, which was where I was studying at. And they actually taught us, they ran like practical seminars and taught us how to use Google Ads. So I thought that was like an amazing opportunity, actually. And it was really kind of shaped where I took my career from then. It was also, at that time, there was a lot of stuff coming out about content marketing. And I absolutely spent hours reading the HubSpot blog. And HubSpot is like a marketing software, and they're very, very good at content marketing. And they have been doing like blogs, especially. They were really educating marketers all around the world at that point what this was all about. So I very much came into this and got this passion, because I hadn't been able to do this in my last job. I became absolutely obsessed with digital marketing. Was learning all of this great stuff, and I just wanted to apply it. I was at uni still, so wasn't looking for a job, but I was like, I'm going to start freelancing, right? And I'm actually going to give myself the experience that nobody else is willing to give me. It was like that kind of choose yourself. And there's no doubt that actually came from reading that book by Eckhart Tolle and actually just choosing myself and deciding that I actually can do what I want. Like, I get to decide. No one else gets to decide what I'm doing. So I started my freelance business. It was called Hooked on Marketing. And I got my first client. My auntie actually got me this first client. So she went to a Pilates and yoga studio. She'd been talking to the owner. She needed help with marketing. She wanted to know what the social media stuff was about. So I helped her out. I charged her $50 an hour. I honestly thought that was so much, but honestly, that's really just like minimum wage plus your, all the stuff you've got to pay, like taxes and all of that kind of thing. It's not really enough to charge. But at the time I was like, my God, that's so much. And yeah, got my first client that way. And then what happened at the end of the year, I actually passed the postgraduate diploma with distinction. So I think that's like an A- average, which, I was never like super academic. So this was like amazing for me. I had planned on staying and doing a second year at uni and doing a master's degree. So that was my initial plan when I left that job to go to uni. I was going to do a master's. The first year was the postgrad diploma. The second year was going to do the master's. But in January the following year, I got my diploma and I saw a job ad for a startup software company that caught my eye. And it was exactly what I was looking for. And I just saw this as a great opportunity. So I pursued that. So I had my job interview. This was a company called Timely. So if you have booked beauty or hair appointments around the world, it is very likely that you have used the software to book in your appointments. In my opinion, it is an elite piece of software. It was based in this town that I was living in, the bottom of the South Island in New Zealand. And New Zealand is actually really good at tech. They have quite a few big tech companies like Xero. If you've used that accounting software, that's from New Zealand. And there was another company at the time called Vend. I don't know if they will still be around. That's, I think, what do you call it? Like software for in shops and stuff. And then Timely. So, which was the hair and beauty software for booking appointments. So I met with the CEO who had just really started Timely. It was very, very new. So he had just sold a software company that he had built up and they'd sold that to Trade Me, which was a reasonably big company in New Zealand. So Trade Me is like eBay. So that's the New Zealand version of eBay. So they had sold their booking company or software company to to Trade Me. As a result of that, they had quite a lot of funding that they could then put into another business. It was him and another guy. So he was building Timely, and the reason they were building it is not because they were hero beauty experts. Obviously, they were not. They were developers, but they had this previous company which was in booking as well, but it was for tourism. And they said like everywhere they went, they had people coming up to them saying, can you make something for hair and beauty? Because there is like no decent options in this space. So they listened and they decided to build it. So he hired me based off the interview. He was really looking for people who are entrepreneurial, who potentially had their own business, but were looking for that real experience to be part of something that was going to be really, really fast growing. So it was super exciting. And so he hired me. I was the first marketer, so only marketer on the team. And I was also the first female. His wife did work in the business part-time, so she was there for sure. But besides that, I was the first female. Now, this was like an amazing opportunity. I cannot emphasize, like, this was worth not doing my master's for this. And I got to learn on the fly. And I got to implement everything that I was learning. I was given that freedom. So the CEO and I would often be like, what are we doing? We really dived into content marketing. We dived into email marketing. We did social media. A thing that we really focused on that worked amazingly well is case studies. So I would be going out to customers, taking photos of them just with my phone. And this was in like 2014, right? So my phone wasn't even that good. Writing case studies. And then we were putting these case studies on our website using ads, social media, email, getting them out there. And suddenly, like, things started growing really, really fast. I was spending hours and hours and hours reading the HubSpot blog, learning everything I could about internet marketing, digital marketing. And the company was just growing really, really fast. The marketing team was also growing. So before long, I was not the only marketer. We added designers. He hired an industry rep, like someone from the salon space who had sold a multi-million-dollar salon and was now coming into the marketing team to specifically speak the lingo to their ideal customers. We had photographers on the team. So before long, we had a full-blown marketing team. My role evolved from marketing and communications manager to the digital marketing manager as I got more and more involved with that. I was responsible for the search engine optimization. So all of a sudden, we were ranking on the first page around the world. So the USA, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, we were getting like first page rankings, which obviously made a massive difference. I dived deep into the Google ads. So that was something that actually almost became my full-time job by the time I left, was the Google advertising. And because this was a company that had investors, I learned so much from the investors who would then talk to the CEO about spending money on ads and investing in advertising as a way to get your brand in front of someone on the other side of the world without having to travel. Like, as you know, I came from this industry where it was very much old school, old fashioned. It was about relationships that had been around for decades, getting on a plane, flying to the other side of the world, seeing them. I wasn't the one doing that, but that's what that was about. And now I was in this world where you could do that while sitting at your desk at the bottom of the South Island in New Zealand. So that to me was just incredible. I can't actually, it's so funny talking about this because it just makes me realize how passionate I am about digital. And this experience was really what gave that all to me. So digital marketing manager, really spending a lot of time on these ads. I was doing Facebook ads as well, but we really saw success in that business with Google ads for sure. And it drove a lot of growth. So in the time I was there, it went from 500 customers to 5,000. So that's huge, right? These are all monthly recurring revenue. So like monthly customers. I was there for 2.5 years, 2.5 years, but they say in startup land that actually feels like 10. And I definitely think that is accurate. And during that time, we all worked remotely. So I have actually been working from home since 2014. And yeah, that to me, like I feel like a lot of people have, they started working from home during COVID. But by the time COVID hit, I was like, this is old news. I have to say, like, that's a long time to work from home. And I've had very many ups and downs with working from home over the years, but I've definitely found what works for me. So working for Timely was amazing, but startup life is very intense. There's constant pressure. There's a real hustle culture. There's no doubt about that. There's always this feeling like you're never doing enough because you're chasing growth. So while it was amazing, it was also exhausting. And I do think that this definitely contributed to burnout, which I'll later experience, which I'll tell you a little bit about. After 2.5 years, I actually had to relocate to a different part of New Zealand due to my partner's job. He was getting relocated through his job, and I actually really wanted to go because it was meant to be better weather, it was meant to be warmer, all of that kind of stuff. We were moving to the North Island. And even though we were remote when I worked for Timely, we couldn't actually, like, they had hubs. So in the town that I lived in, there was an office space that you could go in and use if you wanted to work from the office space. And then we would have meetings like maybe once a fortnight in there as well. And then they had another hub in New Zealand, which was in Wellington, which is where all the developers, most of them lived. So they, even though everyone worked from home, they also had an office in Wellington. So they didn't actually want you to live outside of either of those places. So I was moving. There was no question about it. And so they couldn't keep me on full time because it was outside of their business practices. But what they did do, I told them that I'm going to go full time into my business because I'd actually had my business this entire time, but as a side hustle. And it had been times where it was very quiet. But over time, I had started working with different clients as well. So it was very much a side hustle up until this point. And at this point, I decided to go full-time into that, which was very, very scary. And you can probably relate to that in some way if maybe you're doing it right now, or maybe you can remember the time when you did go full-time into business. It feels like a very big leap, because all of a sudden you're not getting the regular paycheck. It's all on you to create your own paycheck, and that can feel very, very daunting. So I told them that I was going full-time to my business. I was going to be living in this new town. And then they decided to hire me as a contractor to keep running their ads and keep helping out. I actually think I was just doing the ads at that point. So it was Google ads, Facebook ads, very much still doing the same type of work, except I was no longer on the team. They were hiring me through my business as a contractor. So that was like the dream situation for me. All of a sudden, I had complete control, so I thought, of my business, like I was the one in charge, but that I now had a really big client straight out the gates, which was ultimate. Now, another startup that I had done work for while I was on summer break from uni, they'd actually gone to the university and asked the professor if one of their students could help them do some market research into a global market that they had this product idea for. He recommended me because they were looking for someone that was potentially a mature student that actually had work experience. And obviously, because I came from the export background previously, they hired me over that time. And I'd kept in touch with them after I'd done the research project. And it's actually quite cool, because that product that they had that idea for has actually become their main product. They're now a huge company. They've grown from strength to strength. But at that time, I'd kept in touch with them. I told them I was going out on my own. So they decided, we're also going to hire you. And I was building up this roster of retainer clients. So I got a few more contracts with other tech companies. And then I was also working with small business as well. So I went from like being really scared about taking the leap to having the most incredible clients in terms of solid, high-paying retainer clients. And I had 6 figures in under 8 months. So my business went from basically just a little side hustle to really successful within a very short period of time. And I felt like I was like winning. But then the realities kicked in. So I was busy, like way too busy. I was at my desk all the time. And this is probably a part of the story that you've heard me talk about. Okay, because I do mention this quite a lot, because I think this is a really pivotal moment for me. I was at my desk all the time. I said yes to everything. I people pleased like crazy. I didn't know what being in scope or out of scope even meant. If someone asked me for something, I would do it, and I would do it within the retainer that I was on. I never asked for any extra tasks. I had no boundaries, really. I'd never worked in an agency, and all of a sudden I did have an agency. So I didn't really know what I was doing from the business side of things. I felt like that people pleasing was extreme right then. I was really like, I can do this for you. I can prove myself. It's like that very proving energy. I didn't have those boundaries, and I didn't know much about burnout. And I didn't know what burnout felt like. I never really heard anyone talk about it until I was actually very deep in it. But at this point, I was at my desk. I was still like reading and learning so much about digital marketing, right? And I was using all of my skills for multiple different clients. I was at their beck and call. I was answering emails on the weekend, at nighttime. Like I never stopped. And like probably many of you, I always had this mentality that the customer always comes first. And I think many of us, we have that drilled into us our whole lives, and that's just the way it is. The customer comes first. I actually don't think that is the case these days, but back then, in the decades that I grew up, it very much was the case. And I actually think that was one of my biggest mistakes of being so committed to that idea when I was in this business. So in client work, when you're providing services and doing one-on-one, I do believe that mindset of the customer always comes first will absolutely destroy you if you do not get on top of it, because the customer does not own you. You're running a business, you're providing a service to that customer that is given a scope, and then anything above and beyond that scope is either an extra charge or they don't get it. Whereas I was just doing it for them. Oh my gosh. In hindsight, it's just so basic. But I did not know this stuff, right? And during this time, I was also still obsessed with learning with the digital marketing industry, and I became very interested in what people were doing. So yes, most of my clients were tech companies, small businesses as well, local businesses, people that had online businesses, like quite a wide range. Outside of the tech, I didn't really have any particular niche, but I was getting very interested with what people were doing with personal branding, with online courses. Someone that I was following a lot during this time was Amy Porterfield. I actually started following her in about 2013. Around about that time that I was like deep into the HubSpot content, I had signed up to do one of her programs, which I think was called Profit Lab. And she was all about Facebook ads back then, and really followed her journey, followed a lot of other people in that space as well, and was really intrigued by this business model. And, you know, what I was doing was I was in this position where I had a whole bunch of clients. I had hired some help. I had some contractors helping me. And one of them was full-time. So really moving into that agency space where it could be like, okay, so you have to make a decision. You're at the peak of what you can do for your time. You can grow by hiring people and hiring out their time, or you can do something else. And the thought of then hiring a whole bunch of people that I had to manage and hiring out their time instead of my own, but I'd also be hiring out my time still, I just felt exhausted by that prospect, and it was not what I wanted to do. I think that freedom mindset that, you know, as I spoke about way earlier, where I was, you know, had that nomad mentality, I think that's always stuck with me, that I'm like, I actually am here to live a good life, a life of freedom where I get to do what I want when I want, and I don't want to be dictated to by anyone else. And setting up an agency where I had a big team and growing that way felt absolutely exhausting to me. And even though now, like all these years later, it's like 10 years ago I'm talking about this, I know that I've got the business experience and the knowledge now where I could do that and it would be a lot easier, but I still wouldn't do it because it doesn't appeal to me. And yes, it could be successful. And the funny thing is, I have 100% confidence in saying that if I had continued to grow that business, it would have become a multi-million-dollar business very, very quickly. However, I have zero regrets from walking away from it, but I haven't quite got to that part. So I was definitely attracted to this idea of something more scalable, something more passive, and definitely something more freedom-based, because that freedom focus, like I said, from the moment I was born, I had that feeling like I don't belong here. I'm meant to be doing something bigger, right? So around about this time, I bought a course on how to launch courses, and it was by a guy called David Siteman Garland, and he's actually not around anymore, but back in those days, he was like quite big. He was very successful. So I learned his launch process from him. I understood the process. I loved how it used all the, you know, different bits throughout the launch to really create the result. But so I understood that process, but I struggled to find a topic, and I didn't really know, because there's quite a few different areas of marketing that I could have done a course in, right? I had experience in search engine optimization. I did Google ads. I did Facebook ads. I knew email marketing. I knew content marketing. And I couldn't put all of that into one course. Like, some people try and do that, and I think that's a disaster. It's way too broad. And like, how can you really teach all of that and it be good in one course? So I was stuck, and I knew I really wanted to do this. I was still working with all of my clients. So I hired a coach, and through a case of elimination, I decided to do search engine optimization. I think a lot of that came down to, I recognized there was a real need for it, and people were wanting to do it because once you do the work on a website and you optimize a website for the search engines, then you actually can get a lot of business that way, but it's not something that you're constantly having to spend money on. And the market was definitely small business owners. So it seemed like a really logical thing. And there was also this mentality that Oh yeah, I'd love to do SEO, search engine optimization in my business, but I don't know how to do it. It's too techy. People seem to have these real blocks. So I wanted to make it simple, and I could simplify it because I have that ability to take very complex things and make them simple so that anyone can do it. So I created this challenge. It was 5 days long. It was called SEO Your Website in 5 days. And like, it was so easy to get people to sign up to this because people really wanted it. Word spread about it really, really quickly. And every time I did it, I had like multiple hundreds of people signing up without even spending money on ads. It was amazing. And then was a very different time as well. I'd just like to say that if you're listening to this in 2025, that is not the reality for most people. Through that process, I did the challenge for the first time. I pre-sold the course. I made $8,000 from the first launch. And I was just like, are you freaking kidding me? I just got paid $8,000 and I don't even have one lesson created. Like, how is this even possible? So I spent a very, very, very busy 6 weeks getting it together. I did it each week, 1 week at a time. So they got week 1 and the content dripped for that, and then they'd get week 2 the following week. And that's 100% how I recommend to do it. So yeah, that was the first look into online courses. And it was the moment that I realized this could really work. Like, this could be a business on its own. I could actually not have to do all of the client stuff anymore, which I felt completely trapped by. And I was actually like extremely burnt out. Like, looking back, I don't even know how I managed to do the launch and then the 6 weeks of creating the content. But, you know, when you are driven by something and you want it bad enough, you will do it. But it was just such a revelation that I could actually make money in this way rather than being on calls all the time with people or just doing it for them, like sitting at my desk, churning away on, you know, doing behind the scenes, all of the stuff behind the scenes to make it work for them. And another thing is, like, most businesses actually they don't have the, they don't have the ability to keep investing in that. They need results, obviously. But I just found it so much more like the prospect of then teaching a business owner how to do something for themselves and empower them with the knowledge that they then always have in their business, and they can do it themselves. It's so much cheaper than outsourcing it. And then they can see the benefits for years and years to come. So that really appealed to me as well. It was just made sense. Like, there were so many small business owners who this really made sense for, whereas my one-on-one or done-for-you services were so out of reach for so many people, which is why most of my clients were those bigger technology companies. So it was at this point I decided that I'm done with the agency. And from here on in, I've probably shared this story quite a few times. So that online course really helped me create multiple revenue streams. So suddenly I had money coming in from more than one way of doing things, which was really great, which meant I didn't have to rely on done-for-you services anymore. At this point, I was actually completely burnt out, and that had started way before I even created the course. So my health was deteriorating rapidly. I was in a state where I actually had to have a rest after having a shower. Like, I was at that point. Okay, so I had to have a lie down to recoup after having a shower. And I got diagnosed with chronic fatigue. It was really, really bad. And I'm not going to go into this too much in this podcast, but I will say that having this level of burnout, I'm very, very grateful that I've been able to recover from it. It absolutely changed my life for the better, but it was an excruciating process. And it is a very lengthy story as well, which is why I'm not going to share it on this podcast. I am going to share about it on its own episode at some point. And I know I've said that in quite a few different podcast episodes, but my experience of going through burnout completely changed my life for the better. But there were so many lessons, so much deconditioning, so much like trusting myself, so much mindset work. And I really feel like that is why, and as someone who hasn't worked with me, you won't probably know this, but one of my skills is the mindset stuff. So when you come into any of my courses, my containers, there is always the strategic and there is the mindset and the energetic. And that is because I have learned through this experience that is needed. It's very powerful. If you just have a strategy without that stuff, then it's less likely that you're going to succeed. So during this time, I was able to step away from the agency completely, which was like a breath of fresh air. My health especially needed it. But at that time, I was also moving. We were relocating again from the North Island of New Zealand, and we were moving to Australia. So life outside of the business was a big focus of my time. Around about that time, I also trained as a life coach. I got certified in neuro-linguistic programming, which is NLP, and timeline therapy. One of my clients actually got me into that. So one of my clients was a trainer in the space, and she actually invited me to come on the training. So I kind of fell into that by accident, but really was blown away by what I had learned. And that is a big part of, what I'm referring to in terms of my ability to help with mindset. And I do have to say, though, I got kind of sidetracked by that. And while it gave me the ability to be able to coach, which I'm very grateful for, and it's something I use every day now, I also kind of got lost in the space of, maybe I should be a life coach. And I thought that for a long time. But I eventually realized that actually I just wanted to coach in online marketing, not life coaching. And ever since I made that decision, it's like so much easier when you just know what you want to do, right? And before long, COVID hit, the pandemic came along. We were living in Australia. We couldn't come back to New Zealand. We still had our house in New Zealand, and we're fully in Australia. And at that time, I fully pivoted into coaching online business owners. So I wasn't doing any done for you for a while by that point, but I actually put it out there. I'm now coaching business owners in digital marketing. So that's where it started. It was like in all of these different parts of marketing, I'll help you master that within your own business. And during that time, I was also continuing to launch my SEO course and working with incredible clients one-on-one in that coaching space as well. And a lot of my time, a lot of my hours was spent on recovering from burnout, which is why I love this business model, right? So this business model gave me the freedom to do that. I would never have gotten that from an agency. I feel like when you're running an agency or you're a freelancer, you've got people who are chasing up with you all the time, like, where's this thing at? Where's this thing at? And you're on other people's timelines. You're never on your own timeline. Even if you have the best structure, even if you have great boundaries, it's always about you are providing a service and that is what you do. Whereas the business model that I moved to gave me the freedom where I was actually in charge. And that was just such a relief. Like, I can't even express the relief that gave me in my life, that I could have money coming in from other revenue streams that actually did not require me to necessarily even show up. Like with a course, for example, somebody could be watching your training on the other side of the world during the day while you're asleep on this side of the world, not doing anything, right? But you've still made the money because you're providing something of value. That is what I love about it. And I really do believe that as women, we are not like men. We can't push all day long. We do not have the energy, especially like now I'm 42. We do not just sleep like men do. You know what I mean? And there's actually like research that shows we need more sleep. We need more rest. We have these ups and downs in our health. We have this hormonal stuff. Like this is perimenopause, which is like obviously people are talking about that everywhere at the moment. I think that's getting a lot more attention than what it's ever been. And it's definitely something that I have started to experience. But I have the space and the time to actually really focus on my health, of managing my energy, all of that kind of stuff. And, I'm not going into the burnout on this episode so much, but this is definitely something that has allowed me to actually recover from, like I said, chronic fatigue. And I have met so many people over the years. Actually, I was in a retreat in Bali in September last year, and I was in the pool talking to one of the other ladies on the retreat, and she's a nurse, and she said that she had worked with many people with chronic fatigue who never have recovered. So, I'm so grateful that I have, and I do put that down to this business model. In many ways, it has allowed me the freedom to have the income to spend on my health, but also like to keep working through this period rather than completely losing my career, which I think would happen to people if they're on a 9-to-5 and they get that sick, then they actually do have to give up their careers. Whereas I could actually just steal moments during the day to keep things running. And instead of having a full calendar, I could pick and choose how much I took on. So yeah, as women, I think we just go through cycles, we go through changes, and we can't push 12 hours a day forever. Like, we can't keep hustling like we may have in our early 30s. And yeah, I just think that's why I'm so passionate about this business model, I guess. Like, it is because it just works so well for women, and we can make unlimited income as much as we like. We can have that time freedom. We can really take care of the things that matter for us. Obviously, I am now a mother of an 18-year-old, but if you had young children, I think this business model is absolutely amazing if you have young children and you're working around the hours that you have available as well. And I do, obviously, making more money gives you more choice as well. So it's not only just the way that you're able to, it's a realistic way of actually blending work into your life. It's like away from that 9-to-5 model. It's away from that way that society has kind of set us up to work, which is kind of dying, which is great. But it also gives us the ability to make as much money as we'd like. And like, there is no ceiling. So then with money comes choice. It means that we're able to invest and build our wealth. It means that we're able to create wealth for our children and leave a legacy. It means that we're able to protect ourselves and create like a really strong future. It means that we are able to leave a situation that we may not want to be in anymore. And, you know, hearing my earlier story, I think that's like something I deeply care about. I think that every woman, if they're not being treated well, they need to have the money, because money is the thing that is stopping a lot of people from making the decisions that they really want to make. You have money, you have choices. There's no doubt about it. And that, to me, in my life experience, has very much been the truth. If you don't have money, you don't have choice. You have money, you have choice. So this business model, you can make as much money as you like, but working in a way that really works for you. So in around, I think it was 2021, I decided, you know what, I'm like so passionate about this online course thing, about these leverage programs, about having multiple income streams, that I am no longer going to be coaching on everything and trying to be everyone's answer to everything digital marketing wise, because that was very hard. I was working with e-commerce businesses and I was working with people who are service providers as well. And it just became too hard to keep on top of all of that, keep my knowledge relevant in all areas of marketing for both of those different markets. So I decided to really focus in on the service provider side of things in terms of helping service providers turn their knowledge into products and create that leveraged income in their business, because my why behind that was so much bigger. Sure, I can help people in e-commerce. I have helped many businesses in e-commerce grow their brand significantly. One of my clients, we went from 5K a month to 100K a month with the digital marketing that we worked together on. This is one of my coaching clients. So in a way, it was kind of sad to close the door on that, but I'm so happy with where I've been gone to from there. So as soon as I stopped providing for everyone, like providing coaching and training for everyone, and just really focused on helping women turn their ideas into profitable online courses, things have got a lot simpler for me. So sometimes niching down can be amazing. And, you know, I know you hear a lot about niching down, but for me, it's been really good. More so that I no longer have to keep up with all of this different stuff, and I just get to really focus on what I'm passionate about. And the reason that I did choose this side rather than maybe going into another area of digital marketing is that I'm so passionate. Like, this is where my why is huge. Whereas with the e-commerce side of things, I'd never actually had my own e-commerce business. Sure, I could help with the marketing and scaling side of things through my digital marketing knowledge, but it's not something I was super passionate about. And if the opportunity came up for me to run my e-commerce business, particularly at that time, I wouldn't have done it. I had no interest in running my own e-commerce business. So that's why I chose that way. And that's how I have come to be doing what I'm doing. It's how I come to start this podcast. So a year after that, I did start the podcast and have been working specifically in this area ever since. And I absolutely love it. So that's my story in a nutshell. I know this is probably the longest episode I have ever done, which is crazy. I knew it would be a long one. I actually contemplating splitting it up into a few parts, but anyway, I just smashed it out in one go. I know it's a long listen. So that is my story right from where I started, how I got here and what I've learned, and how, what kind of gives me the right to show up and say that I can help you, because I know that I can. I've gone from the ski slopes to managing over $1 billion in sales in a huge export company, through a situation in my mid-20s that was like very scary, to a startup, through burnout, and then to building a sustainable freedom-based business that I absolutely love. I've worked incredibly hard over the years. I've learned a lot. I've messed up more times than I can count, especially in my earlier years. But the biggest thing I've learned is that your business should support your life, not the other way around. So there you have it, my long, winding path to get to where I am today. And I hope it's provided a little bit of insight into me, my story, why I'm like the way I am, why I do what I do. And, hopefully this instilled confidence that I am able to help you, because I 100% know that I can. And if you are someone who is looking at making a move, maybe you're experiencing burnout, maybe there's a better way for you, then definitely reach out. Message me or DM me on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. I'm at @LouBlakely_. So if you've made it this far, you've really done well. So I'm so glad to have you here today. And yeah, it's been quite strange actually sharing this long story and talking about myself for so long. But I definitely feel like the burnout story needs to be told as well. And that will hopefully happen before too long. So thanks so much for listening today. And I would love to see you on the next episode. Bye. Thanks, course creators and go-getters. You're incredible. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit subscribe in your podcast app so you don't miss an episode. If you'd like to find out more about what I offer, head across to loublakely.com. See you next time.